"Hey, Blackie, go serve." The words didn't just land, they cracked through the chandelier's glow like glass under pressure. A ripple of laughter followed, sharp and eager, rolling off the polished marble floor of the West Haven Grand Ballroom. Danielle Brooks didn't flinch. She stood near the champagne tower in a simple ivory dress. No sequins, no diamond earrings, no glittering badge of the power she carried. She lifted her phone to her ear, her gaze locked on the woman pointing across the room. Behind that woman, a half-circle of men in tailored tuxedos grinned like it was all sport. One of them actually snapped his fingers at her, as if summoning a waitress. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here." Now, back to Danielle. Her voice into the phone was low, deliberate. "It's happening. Cancel the $900 million deal." The laughter faltered, not gone, but dented. They hadn't heard the words, only seen the way she said them. Calm, certain, like she wasn't the one cornered, but the one holding the clock. "Which catering company are you with?" the tall man to the right called out, lifting his champagne flute. "If you're fast, we might tip." The woman beside him smirked, leaning in for the kill. "Sweetheart, this is for investors only." The ballroom's music didn't stop, but the air shifted. Eyes turned. A photographer hesitated mid-shot. Near the stage, a young reporter slid her phone from her clutch, the camera lens catching the scene over a line of crystal glasses. Danielle's lips curved just enough to register, not enough to comfort. She'd seen this posture before, entitlement dressed as etiquette. At 28, she'd been escorted out of a boardroom she was scheduled to lead, because someone didn't see her name on the list. At 34, she'd been mistaken for her own assistant while negotiating a global acquisition. The man's voice came again, louder. "Security." A uniformed guard glanced up from the entrance, uncertain. The group's matriarch pearl necklace, eyes like steel, plucked the event pass from Danielle's wrist. The rip of paper was loud enough to cut the strings of the quartet in the corner. "Get her out." Danielle didn't move. Her phone stayed at her ear. "Priority 1, she repeated softly. Across the ballroom, the young reporter's hand tightened around her phone. She didn't know the woman in ivory, but she knew the look in her eyes, the kind that didn't need to yell to be heard, the kind that, in minutes, would flip the entire room. The ballroom's chandelier light seemed colder now, sharper, catching the edges of judgment in every glance. The group in tuxedos hadn't moved, but their voices carried like they owned the air. "Which table hired you?" the tall man said again, louder this time. His tone wasn't curiosity, it was command. The pearl necklace matriarch added, "You're holding up service. People are waiting." Danielle's eyes didn't leave theirs. She shifted her weight, calm, one hand still at her side. The phone in her other hand stayed pressed to her ear. From near the stage, the young reporter Allison Reeves, barely 30, angled her phone higher, the camera lens slipping between two champagne flutes. The red record dot glowed. She wasn't just watching now. She was documenting. A waiter passing by slowed, eyes flicking between Danielle and the cluster of overdressed accusers. He didn't say a word, but his jaw tightened. He kept moving. The pearl necklace woman took a step closer, the heels of her navy pumps clicking against the marble like punctuation. "Sweetheart, this event is for investors who actually matter." She glanced over her shoulder at a nearby security guard, a man in his 40s with a silver earpiece. "Escort her out, please." The guard hesitated. Danielle caught that hesitation, stored it. At 34, she'd watched a hotel concierge pause just like that before telling her the penthouse was already booked. That pause always came when policy met prejudice and neither side knew which would win. The guard finally walked toward her, slow, cautious. "Ma'am, I'll need to see your credentials." "M6. They're gone," Danielle said evenly, nodding toward the shredded event pass in pearl, necklace's manicured hand. The reporter's eyebrows rose. She adjusted her phone, capturing the woman holding the torn remains like a trophy. Pearl necklace smirked. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." Danielle lowered the phone just enough for her voice to carry. "You already chose hard." Then she brought it back to her ear. "Move the capital to Harlow. Don't wait for the signing." "Jean." A ripple ran through the bystanders' quiet gasps. shifting stances. One man in a gray suit whispered to his wife, "Did she just say Harlow?" The wife's eyes widened. The tall man in the group scoffed. "Is this some stunt? You think we'll fall for a bluff?" Danielle's gaze didn't waver. No bluff, just business. Allison, the reporter, stepped forward now, voice careful but clear. "For the record, she was invited. I saw her name on the investor list this afternoon." The tall man laughed sharply. "You must have read it wrong." "I didn't," Allison replied, lifting her phone a little higher, "and I'm not the only one who saw it." Somewhere behind the circle, another voice chimed in, a young catering staffer with a tray of sparkling water. "She's telling the truth." His words were quiet, but they landed. The pearl necklace woman's smirk faltered, just for a breath. Danielle saw it. Everyone did. She let the silence hold for a moment longer, then said into her phone, "Phase 2 is in motion." The guard froze mid-step. He didn't know what Phase 2 was, but he could feel it wasn't going to favor the people who'd summoned him. The air in the ballroom wasn't just tense anymore, it was heavy, like the first drop in a storm that knew exactly where to fall. Music from the string quartet still floated faintly, but it felt disconnected, like it belonged to another night entirely. The pearl necklace matriarch stepped in closer, her perfume sharp, voice louder now so the nearby tables could hear. "People like you always try to sneak in where you don't belong." Daniela didn't blink. The tall man took his cue, plucking a fresh event pass from his pocket, someone else's, and holding it out mockingly. "Here, maybe this one will match the story you're selling." Then, with deliberate slowness, he tore it in half, letting the pieces drift to the marble floor like confetti. Gasps broke out around them. Allison, the reporter, was already circling to capture the moment, her phone steady despite the adrenaline running through her hands. The matriarch turned to the security guard. "She's stalling for attention. Remove her." The guard moved forward. Danielle held her ground. "On what grounds?" "Fraud," the tall man answered instantly. "She's pretending to be someone she's not, trying to insert herself into a $900 million transaction." That number $900 million hung in the air. Several guests at nearby tables stopped mid-conversation. One of them, a man in a tailored navy suit, leaned to his companion. "That's the size of the Whitmore deal." Danielle's lips tightened, not in anger, but in precision. She lowered her phone just enough to speak into the room. "It was." The matriarch's eyes narrowed. "Was?" Danielle brought the phone back to her ear. "Confirm full withdrawal of capital. Redirect to Harlow Group. Notify both legal teams." Across the room, someone choked on their champagne. The tall man laughed again, but this time it cracked halfway through. "You can't redirect anything. You're no one here." From the back, the young catering staffer spoke up again, louder now. "She's not no one. You don't cancel a $900 million deal unless you own a big part of it." The matriarch whipped around toward him. "Stay out of this, boy." "Too late," Allison cut in, her voice gaining an edge. "You made it everyone's business the moment you tore up her pass." The security guard stopped 2 steps short of Danielle, eyes darting between the accusers and the growing cluster of onlookers. A few phones were raised openly now, red record dots blinking like small, defiant warnings. Danielle's voice stayed low, measured. "One last time, are you certain you want me removed?" The matriarch didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." She nodded at the guard. "Do it." "Oh." He took another step, and that's when Danielle shifted, not backwards, forward, closing the space between herself and the cluster that had been circling her since the first insult. The pearl necklace's posture faltered by a hair, just enough to register in every watching eye. Danielle spoke without raising her voice, but every word carried. "You just told the wrong woman she doesn't belong in the room she paid for." The storm had officially broken. The ballroom wasn't buzzing anymore, it was vibrating. Every glance, every whisper was a current running through the room, feeding something none of them could quite name. Danielle held her phone steady, her eyes never leaving the matriarch. "Proceed to Phase 3, she said into the receiver. On the other end, a crisp female voice, Rebecca, her chief of staff, didn't ask questions. "Understood. Legal is on the line. Capital transfer in progress." The tall man scoffed, a brittle sound now. "Phase 3? What is this, a game?" Danielle's gaze slid to him for the first time. Not a game. An audit. The words didn't land like a punch, they landed like a filing cabinet dropped from a height, all weight and inevitability. From the side of the room, Allison spoke up again. If she's bluffing, why do you look nervous? Her phone was angled deliberately, so that both Danielle and the accusers were in frame. The pearl necklace matriarch shot back. Because this woman is trying to humiliate my family at a public event. No, Danielle corrected softly. I'm just letting your own actions speak louder than I ever could. The security guard shifted uncomfortably. He'd seen enough stunts at high-profile events to recognize when something was unraveling, and this wasn't unraveling in the way the accusers thought. Near the champagne tower, the young catering staffer whispered to another waiter, "She's in control. Look at her, she hasn't moved an inch unless she wanted to." Rebecca's voice returned in Danielle's ear. "Corporate has flagged the Whitmore family's portfolio for breach of good faith in negotiations. Do you want me to loop in Harlow's team now?" Danielle's eyes swept the room. More phones were recording now, some subtly, others defiantly. "Yes," she said. "Make it loud." "Oh," the tall man laughed, but it was hollow. "Even if you had the power, no one cancels a $900 million deal mid-gala. That's not how the world works." "That's exactly how my world works," Danielle said. The matriarch stepped in again, voice sharp. "Do you even know who you're speaking to?" "Yes," Danielle replied, and this time her smile showed just barely. "Do you?" That landed. Not just with them, but with the ring of onlookers who were piecing together the truth. Allison took a small, visible breath. "I think we're all about to find out." The guard hesitated again, caught between the order he'd been given and the feeling that he was about to make a career-ending mistake. Danielle lowered her phone. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge now, like the moment before a verdict is read. "You've called me a fraud. You've torn my credentials. You've tried to remove me from a deal I built, and through all of it, I've been patient." She stepped forward just enough for the space between them to feel smaller, tighter. "Patience is over." Rebecca's voice came through the phone one last time. "All parties notified. Press statement drafted. You're clear to proceed." Danielle looked at the matriarch, the tall man, the pearl necklace glinting under the chandelier. "Good," she said. "Let's end this." The room held its breath. The reveal was coming. The chandelier light seemed to tilt toward her, as if the room itself wanted a better view. Every phone lens followed her now. Even the quartet had slowed, bows hovering above strings, caught in the tension like everyone else. Danielle stepped forward into the open space between her and the Whitmore family. Her heels were steady, each click against the marble sounding like a countdown. "You've spent the last 15 minutes treating me like I wandered in here by mistake," she began. Her voice was calm enough to carry without the microphone, every syllable deliberate. "You've accused me of fraud. You've called security. You've destroyed my credentials in front of 200 witnesses." The tall man folded his arms, trying to smirk. The matriarch's jaw was set, but her fingers tightened around her clutch. "And the entire time," Danielle continued, "you never once asked my name." She paused. That silence was heavy, waiting. Allison, the reporter, caught the exact moment Danielle's gaze sharpened. Phones shifted in unison, the red record lights steady as heartbeats. "I am Danielle Brooks," she said, her voice rising just enough to pierce the edges of the ballroom. "CEO of Brooks Global, architect of the very deal you were celebrating tonight. The $900 million Whitmore acquisition you've been bragging about? I built it. I funded it. And I just gave it to your competitor." The words detonated in the air. The matriarch blinked, lips parting as if to argue but finding no words. The tall man's arms dropped slightly. Gasps swelled from the outer ring of guests. One man near the back clapped once sharp before others joined, scattered but growing. A ripple of applause mixed with low murmurs, a tide turning in real time. "You're bluffing," the tall man managed. Daniela tilted her head. "Check your phone." It was a challenge, and a sentence rolled into one. He hesitated, then pulled it from his pocket. His eyes flicked to the screen, color drained. The matriarch did the same, her manicured fingers trembling as she read. Around them, others were reacting to the same push notification. Whitmore Global loses $900 million, deal to Harlow Group, effective immediately. Allison's camera caught the exact moment the matriarch's posture collapsed. pearls glinting as her shoulders dipped. The tall man turned away, but there was nowhere to go. "I didn't need to raise my voice," Danielle said into the sudden quiet. "I didn't need to call the press. You did the work for me. All I did was let you be seen." The security guard took a small step back from her, as if recognizing the line between duty and disaster. From the far end of the ballroom, the catering staffer who'd spoken earlier whispered to a colleague, "She owns the room now." No one argued. The moment the push notification spread through the ballroom, the atmosphere shifted from tension to rupture. Conversations fractured mid-sentence. Glasses were set down too quickly, the crystal ringing like alarm bells. The tall man's face was flushed now, but not with confidence. His jaw worked soundlessly before he muttered to the matriarch, "We can fix this." "No," she snapped under her breath, eyes darting toward the door as if she could walk out of the humiliation. But there was no exit from the lenses already locked on her. Allison's phone didn't waver. She zoomed in, catching the pearls against the matriarch's tightening throat. Across the room, the catering staffer set down his tray and simply folded his arms, a small, defiant smile on his face. The quartet in the corner had stopped playing entirely now, bows resting against their sides, watching the real performance unfold. A man in a navy suit, one of the Whitmore family's own advisors, stepped forward. "Danielle, this isn't necessary. We can renegotiate." Danielle didn't even turn to him. "You had your chance to speak with me when you thought I was a waitress. You wasted it." The security guard, still planted a few feet away, shifted his weight. "Ma'am, my apologies." His voice was quiet, but it carried in the sudden hush. Her eyes softened for just a second, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement before she looked back to the Whitmores. The tall man tried again, desperation cracking his tone. "Look, we didn't." "You did," Danielle cut in, the finality in her voice silencing him. "And now you live with it." From the side, Allison spoke to no one in particular, but her voice was recorded all the same. "This is what happens when power walks in quietly." A ripple of agreement passed through the onlookers. Some began clapping again, more steadily now, the sound swelling in the high-ceilinged space. Others simply watched, phones raised, knowing they were catching a moment that would travel far beyond the ballroom. The matriarch tried one last gambit. "We can make this right." Danielle stepped closer, not aggressive, just deliberate. Right would have been recognizing me before I had to announce myself. Right would have been treating a stranger with basic dignity. Now, all you have is the deal you lost. Silence. The catering staffer spoke again, his voice firmer than before. "You don't get to erase someone twice." That line landed hard. Even the guard nodded once, slowly. Danielle straightened her shoulders. "This conversation is over. And so is your claim to my time." Phones kept recording as she turned toward the exit, the murmur of the crowd following her like a tide receding. The Whitmores stood frozen, pearls and tuxedos looking suddenly like costumes from a failed play. And for the first time all night, Danielle was the only one in the room who didn't need to say another word. It started with a vibration. The tall man's phone buzzed twice, a persistent tremor against his palm. He glanced down and blanched 3 missed calls from the Whitmore board chair. The matriarch's clutch began to ring a second later, her ringtone slicing through the air like a reprimand. She didn't answer. From the far side of the room, the Navy suit advisor's phone lit up too. He stepped away, speaking in a low, urgent tone. But even without hearing the words, the message was clear. Damage control had begun, and it was already failing. Allison's camera tracked all of it, the shifting stances, the rapid-fire texts, the small tells of panic. She whispered into her mic, "The family's imploding in real time." Our guests who had been clustered around the Whitmores earlier now drifted away, their polite smiles evaporating. One couple near the champagne tower pivoted mid-conversation and joined the small crowd around Danielle instead, their body language announcing where their loyalties now stood. The pearl necklace matriarch reached for the tall man's arm, her composure fraying. "We need to get to the car," she murmured. "Not yet," he replied through gritted teeth, his eyes darting toward Danielle's retreating figure. But when he looked back, half the investors in the room were avoiding his gaze entirely. The quartet, who had been silent since the reveal, began quietly packing up their instruments, as if the event itself was over. In truth, It was the gala had stopped being a celebration the moment Danielle took the floor. The catering staffer, still stationed nearby, leaned toward another server. They're radioactive now. No one wants to be seen shaking their hands. He was right. The Whitmore's inner circle had dissolved into scattered pairs, each person hunched over a phone, sending messages that reeked of damage control. One woman, clearly a PR handler, hurried in from the hallway with a tight expression and a tablet in hand. The tall man took one look at the screen she showed him and swore under his breath. Across the ballroom, Danielle's chief of staff, Rebecca, was speaking quietly with a group of high-profile guests, Harlow Group executives. Their posture was relaxed, even friendly. Papers exchanged hands. Smiles returned. The message was unmistakable. The power had shifted, and it wasn't shifting back. The matriarch finally broke, her voice a sharp whisper. "She's just destroyed us in front of everyone." The tall man didn't answer. He was staring at Allison, whose phone was still aimed at them like a spotlight they couldn't escape. Somewhere behind them, another guest muttered just loud enough for the nearest phones to pick up. They brought this on themselves. And then came the sound that cut deepest chairs scraping back as more guests rose to leave. Not just to follow Danielle, but to abandon the Whitmores completely. The ballroom was emptying around them, the space that had been theirs shrinking by the second. The collapse wasn't coming. It was already here. Danielle didn't rush. She didn't need to. Each step toward the exit was measured, deliberate, like she was giving the Whitmores time to feel every ounce of what was happening to them. Rebecca intercepted her halfway, a sleek tablet in hand. "All Harlow contracts are signed," she murmured. "And per your instruction, we've revoked Whitmore's access to the Brooks Global Investor Portal." "Good," Danielle said. "Make sure every vendor and supplier in our network gets the memo before midnight." Rebecca's fingers moved swiftly over the screen. "Drafting now." "You want me to CC their legal?" "Bury them in it," Danielle replied without hesitation. The tall man, still anchored in place across the ballroom, seemed to sense the conversation's weight. His voice cut through the fading chatter. "You can't just lock us out. We have agreements." Danielle turned slightly, enough for her words to carry without crossing the space. "Agreements built on respect. You voided that clause before we even started tonight." Murmurs rippled through the remaining guests. One investor whispered, "She's freezing them out entirely," his tone a mix of awe and caution. Rebecca's tablet pinged. "Done. Vendor notices sent. Our IT confirms their logins have been disabled." "Perfect," Danielle said. "And send the same to the press, worded as a values decision. Make it clear we don't partner with people who humiliate others in public." From her vantage point, Allison caught the moment Rebecca hit send. It was a small tap, but the kind that carries consequences for years. The pearl necklace matriarch's voice finally cracked. "This is vindictive." "No," Danielle said, fully facing her now. "This is responsible leadership. If you think it's harsh, you should consider how it felt to stand here and be told I didn't belong in the deal I built." The matriarch's lips trembled, but she said nothing. A server passed by with a tray of champagne. Danielle stopped him with a gentle hand. "I'll take one," she said, lifting the glass with quiet finality. "And send another to the Harlow table. Tell them congratulations." Across the room, the Harlow executives raised their glasses back in acknowledgement. The symbolism was sharp. The celebration had officially moved camps. Rebecca leaned in one last time. "Do you want me to initiate the portfolio review of Whitmore's holdings?" Danielle's answer was immediate. "Yes. Flag anything tied to our network. Then shut it down." The tall man took an involuntary step forward, but stopped short under the weight of every phone still recording. He knew one wrong move now would be replayed online for weeks. Danielle set the champagne flute back on the passing tray untouched. "I don't need to toast to this," she said softly. "It was never a win, it was a correction." With that, she turned toward the exit again. The Whitmores frozen behind her, locked out of more than just a party. The notification hit phones like a wave. One by one, heads bowed over glowing screens, and the ballroom began to hum, not with music, but with the low, electric chatter of breaking news. Allison read it out loud for her livestream audience, voice sharp with the thrill of a scoop. Brooks Global official statement. Partnership with Whitmore Group terminated effective immediately due to breach of values and public misconduct. She glanced at the lens. That's confirmation, folks. This isn't rumor. It's corporate fact. Across the room, the Harlow executives stood, shaking hands with guests who just minutes ago were orbiting the Whitmores. The migration was obvious. Fortunes, reputations, and attention were flowing toward the new center of gravity. One older investor tapped his friend's shoulder. "Pull whatever you've got tied up with Whitmore before Monday." The friend nodded, already drafting an email to his broker. A PR agent in a navy sheath dress slipped into the corner, phone pressed to her ear. "Cancel tomorrow's press conference. No, don't even reschedule. We're in salvage mode now." Her eyes darted toward the Whitmores, then away as if proximity itself was bad optics. The catering staffer who'd spoken earlier passed by Allison and murmured, "Feels like watching a building collapse in slow motion." She didn't disagree. The cameras weren't just on Danielle anymore, they were swinging to capture the fallout. The Whitmore's cluster shrinking, the advisors scattering, the matriarch's gaze fixed on the floor. Danielle, meanwhile, was in quiet conversation with Rebecca near the exit. No drama, no raised voice, just crisp directives. A few guests approached her cautiously, introducing themselves, offering cards. She accepted some, declined others, but each interaction carried a clear subtext. Alliances were shifting, and she was choosing them carefully. A young journalist from another outlet sidled up to Allison. "Is she always like this? So precise?" Allison kept her lens trained on Danielle. "This is the first time I've seen her in action, and I'm starting to think precision is the whole point." The tall man's phone rang again. He ignored it, shoving it back into his pocket. The matriarch finally looked up, scanning the room as if searching for one sympathetic face. There were none. From the balcony above, a photographer snapped a wide shot of the entire ballroom, the emptying tables on one side, the growing crowd around Danielle on the other. It was the kind of image that would make front pages, not just a moment, but a map of power in motion. By the time Danielle began her final walk to the exit, the Whitmores were already being erased in real time. Their names were trending online not for a record-breaking deal, but for losing it in the most public way possible. The ripple wasn't stopping here. It was just beginning to reach the shore. The conference room at Brooks Global's downtown headquarters was nothing like the West Haven ballroom. No chandeliers, no champagne towers, just glass walls, a long walnut table, and the kind of silence that meant everyone in the room knew exactly why they were there. Danielle sat at the head of the table, flanked by Rebecca on her right and two Harlow Group executives on her left. Across from them, a screen displayed the latest market data. Whitmore Group stock down 14% in the first hour of trading. Harlow's CEO, a silver-haired man named Jonathan Pierce, leaned back in his chair. "You've already gutted their biggest acquisition in a decade. What's next?" Danielle didn't hesitate. "We make sure they can't rebuild off someone else's capital. That means tightening the network." Rebecca slid a document across the table. "This is a list of all shared vendors, partners, and subcontractors between Brooks, Global, Harlow Group, and Whitmore. We've already reached out to 60% of them with alternative contracts. Whitmore is losing supply lines as we speak." Jonathan glanced at the list, then at Danielle. "You're going for a clean break. I'm going for a permanent one," Danielle said. "If they want to play the long game in our market, they'll have to start from scratch. And by then, they won't have the leverage or the reputation to compete." A younger Harlow exec tapped his tablet. "Press sentiment's still swinging your way. If we move fast, we can frame this as an industry-wide standard. Zero tolerance for public misconduct." "Do it," Danielle said. "And make it loud enough that anyone thinking of siding with Whitmore understands the cost." Rebecca's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and smiled faintly. Investor Coalition just confirmed they're pulling an additional $200 million from Whitmore's remaining projects. Jonathan chuckled. "You've turned them into a cautionary tale overnight." Danielle's expression didn't change. "Good. That's exactly where they belong." For a moment, the room was quiet except for the hum of the city outside. Then Danielle added, "One more thing. I want our legal team to review every pending trademark, patent, or licensing deal in their pipeline. If it aligns with our portfolio, we buy it before they can. And if it doesn't, we tie it up long enough that they can't use it." Jonathan's brow lifted. Aggressive. Danielle met his gaze. Necessary. The plan was brutal, surgical, and entirely within the rules. By the time the meeting ended, Whitmore's options had narrowed to the point of suffocation. As the Harlow team left, Jonathan paused at the door. "You know," he said, "most people would have settled for walking out of that ballroom with the moral victory." Danielle stood, gathering her files. "Moral victories are for people who want applause. I want results." And with that, she turned toward her office, the city skyline waiting beyond the glass, a reminder that in her world, the real power moves always happen after the cameras are off. The city was painted gold by the setting sun, the glass towers catching fire in its light. From the corner office of Brooks Global, Danielle stood with her hands in her pockets, watching the skyline like it was a chessboard she'd already mastered. On her desk, a single envelope lay unopened. The embossed seal of the Whitmore Group was impossible to miss. Rebecca had placed it there an hour ago with a quiet, "It's marked urgent." Danielle didn't reach for it. Instead, she turned slightly toward the wall of windows, her reflection overlaying the city beyond. Power wasn't in the letter they'd sent. It was in the fact she didn't need to open it to know what it said: pleas for reconsideration, half apologies dressed as diplomacy, maybe even an offer to buy back her favor. Behind her, the muted television played a news segment. Clips from the gala, headlines scrolling beneath. Danielle Brooks sets new standard for corporate conduct. $900 million deal collapse sparks industry reckoning. The anchor's voice was crisp. The message is clear: humiliation in the boardroom or the ballroom carries a cost. Danielle took a slow sip from her coffee, the steam rising like a signal into the air. Outside, the city moved on traffic. Lights flickering on. Another day folding into night. But for the Whitmores, time had stopped. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jonathan Pierce. Vendor lockout complete. Trademark acquisition underway. They won't recover from this. She typed back 2 words. As planned. For a long moment, she simply stood there, watching the light shift, letting the quiet fill the room. She thought of the torn event pass, the smirk, the call to security. And then she thought of the way the crowd had parted as she walked out, how the applause had grown not because she demanded it, but because they recognized something undeniable. Danielle set her coffee down, finally picking up the Whitmore envelope. She walked it to the paper shredder in the corner, fed it through without breaking eye contact with the skyline. The blades hummed, and the seal split into ribbons. Rebecca stepped in just as the last shred fell. "Press is asking if you'll give a statement tomorrow." Danielle shook her head. The statement's already been made. Outside, the final light of the day caught the tallest building in view, the one with Brooks Global's name etched into its crown. It glowed against the deepening blue, unshakable, unmistakable, and in that moment, Danielle Brooks smiled not for the victory, but for the certainty that she'd never needed to prove she belonged in the room. She'd built the room.